Whoa, we are in for such a treat today because today on the Girl Out of Order podcast, I am introducing you to such a unique guest. And I'm thrilled that she said yes. We had an amazing conversation when we were first discussing her coming on the podcast. And I'm so excited to introduce you to this amazing woman. Her name is Dr. Gala Gorman. And if you don't know Dr. Gala yet, you have to find this woman and follow her everywhere you can. She is a licensed acupuncturist, which I got to be honest, and I told her this, I don't like needles, so she had to sell me on it. And boy, she is so knowledgeable and she's so innovative in the way that she approaches the health of all humans, but in particular women. She's also a naturopath, and she goes into great detail and explains that. And she's an author of a book called What's Your Kryptonite? And she gets to explain that in our conversation today. And I'm so excited for you to get to know her in large part because she truly addresses a topic that is common to all women, and that is health issues related to chronic stress. Raise your hand if you can relate to having chronic stress. She pulls back the curtain and says, we have to start looking at our health from a holistic perspective and addressing the effects that stress has on our overall health. Here's my favorite part about Dr. Gala Gorman. She is committed to helping women reclaim their superwoman status. And I am all in for that. And I know you will be too. So I'm excited for you to sit down, grab your favorite mug of whatever beverage of choice, and enjoy the intelligent, the innovative, and the amazing Dr. Gala Gorman. Okay, welcome to the show, Dr. Gala Gorman.
Nice to chat with you again today, Christine. Always a fun time.
Yes. Oh, and I just have to say, when you popped on the video, if for any of you who are either thinking about starting a podcast or you have a podcast, if you haven't started doing interviews, start doing it, because when she popped on it and we'd had a little conversation before, it was like welcoming back an old friend. And so it's such a pleasure to have you here. And I'm super excited for our community to hear your unique message.
I'm excited to share it with them as well. So
Wonderful. Okay, so I like to start when I bring guests on. I'm a storyteller, but I'm more than that. I'm a story gatherer. And I truly believe that women learn best through stories. So when I bring guests on, I know you have a passion, you have a profession, you have a mission, but I want I want our listeners to know who Gala Gorman is as a person, as a woman. Like, just tell us what you want us to know so we get a flavor of the woman behind the mission.
sure. So I am a CPA in my former life. I'm not sure, did you know that already?
You did tell me that, and I
yeah.
got a big chuckle out of it, actually.
Yeah. So I started working in an accounting firm literally a few days after I turned 16. So obviously I was not a CPA when I was 16, but I was very much on the fast track. And so by the time I had worked in the accounting field for 20 years, I was pretty much toast. And so that would have happened kind of regardless. But in that last 5 or so years that I worked hands-on in the accounting field, I actually managed an accounting firm, a mid-size accounting firm. I consulted to physician practices. So I helped them with their practice management, and I got to see what goes on with medicine sort of behind the curtain. And I was already interested in alternate philosophy, Eastern philosophy, that sort of thing. So that wasn't just like a complete knee-jerk reaction came out of left field, but I began to see the contrast between taking this natural holistic approach versus taking the Band-Aid approach and honestly how at odds they are. People, for years, I've heard people say, well, you can do both. And I hear you that that's the certainly the easiest way to approach it, but I haven't seen that be really successful personally. So what ended up happening is I had a couple of experiences where I really put this alternative, holistic method to the test and
Mhm.
saw what was possible and just over time got to the point where I was so burnt out and
Mm.
so disillusioned by what I was doing that I just bailed on it. And and it took me a little bit of time to find my way into this alternative medicine that I've been practicing now for, over 20 years. But the acupuncture, I'm an acupuncturist, a licensed acupuncturist and a naturopath.
Mhm.
And what I discovered the more I studied was that all these systems are based on the energy path, the energy systems in the body that have been used by Chinese medicine, Oriental medicine practitioners for thousands of years.
Mm.
So I just love the ancient wisdom and the I apply modern technology to ancient wisdom, and you get like the best of all worlds, but it's still 100% focused on the knowledge and understanding that the human body was designed perfectly, and if it's not
Mm.
working if perfectly, if there's something going wonky, there's a reason for it.
And
And
we just stop there for just a second. I
yeah.
can't hold back because what you're saying is so important. You'll find that I do that a lot, but you dropped so much gold there. And first of all, I want to acknowledge something that's really important for my community to hear, because at Girl Out of Order, we're really about helping women fully embrace their unique selves, their true identities, and building lives that are compelling and gorgeous and rich and juicy. And a lot of that process involves reevaluating our health, reclaiming our bodies. And I want our listeners to hear this woman was an accountant, a CPA, and she decided to pivot because she listened to the wisdom emanating from inside her. Her mind, her soul, her body was telling her, stop, pay attention. It's okay to pivot. So I want our listeners first and foremost to understand that you are a woman that truly has lived out the principle that it's never too late to chart a new course, and that we have to listen to our bodies. And I think that's beautiful. Now,
Yeah, if
go ahead.
the consequences of
Mm,
staying in that really stressed, um, unharmonious state
mm,
is dis-ease escalating to disease.
correct. I
However,
love that.
yeah, it's going to show up in some way, shape, or form. Some people are able to kick the can down the road a little bit longer than
Mhm.
others, depending on your genetic makeup, your environmental situation. There's a countless factors that go into your unique situation. So what we hear a lot is like, why did this person essentially not get away with anything, and this
Mhm.
person gets away with the equivalent of murder,
Right.
and they walk away scot-free, kind of thing. And it's just because there are so many unique factors all coming together inside this machine, essentially, this magical machine that is the human body, that
Yes.
is also dependent on our thoughts and our emotions. And,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
I know you talk about those things a lot here in your conversations,
Mhm.
and really, most of the medical model puts no emphasis at all on that part of the healing journey. And so I say it's kind of like taking a sledgehammer to the problem. And so basically, if you're using medication or some other similar approach, you're essentially trying to sledgehammer the problem into submission, right? But in the process, you've done all this additional damage, right? And so if the problem is bubbling up, there is an emotional component as well. Like
Yeah.
you can
Yes.
you can hit it with a sledgehammer and you can get it to subside a bit, right? You can get it to back off, but it's going to come raging back if you haven't really addressed holistically what created the environment for it to happen
Yeah,
at all.
and maybe you can help our listeners understand, because I know that when you and I first talked, I was like, I get what an acupuncturist is, but I
Yeah.
don't understand the term naturopath. I understand a little bit
Mhm.
more since we talked, but perhaps it would be helpful to have some context of, a holistic, we talk about holistic, we talk about mind, body, spirit connection, but tell our listeners what exactly a naturopath is. What do you do? How does that practically play out in how you treat people?
So a naturopath, um, if you are a licensed naturopath, and only a handful of states and Washington, D.C., honestly, license naturopaths. Um, I am not a licensed naturopath. I'm a licensed acupuncturist. I live in a state where I couldn't get licensed as a naturopath. So in a state where I'm giving you a little bit of a maybe more than you need to know, but I'm doing this because people are going to say, but my naturopath prescribes my hormones and stuff like that. It's because if you live in a state where a naturopath is licensed as like a medical professional, then they can prescribe some medications. Typically, the only kinds of things they'll prescribe is like hormones and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, a naturopath does not prescribe medications, and they use only natural remedies to address some kind of disharmony, dis-ease. And so the only caution I will give you there is that many times, whether it's a naturopath that's practicing functional medicine, even an MD that's practicing functional medicine, whether it's an MD that is strictly like using medication, prescription medication, there's a broad spectrum there of professionals that just because someone is an MD doesn't mean that that's the way they practice. And just because they're a naturopath doesn't mean they use only natural remedies and are really focused on addressing the root cause. What we find a lot of times is that just because patients literally demand it, patients are impatient, impatient
Yeah.
patients.
Yes.
And we've been conditioned from such an early age to just want the problem to go away like now.
Right.
And so rather than doing the counseling and the coaching and working with somebody to kind of root out what's really going on and then have to reverse the damage and that sort of thing, all practitioners want to fall into that, essentially prescribe a supplement, even if it's a natural supplement. And so I would say that you will have a stronger chance of finding a naturopath that will help you get to the root cause of the problem. But I just want to caution you that if it's primarily about going on supplements, and those supplements essentially are going to be taken forever, and there's really not a whole lot of effort being put into getting to real core of the problem, and
Mhm.
I say like pulling it out by its roots,
Right.
then really you're still missing this potential, if you will, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So I love that because when you and I talked previously and in listening to some of your other podcast interviews, one of your biggest passions, if I may say it that way, is really helping women not just handle, but get to the root cause of chronic stress.
Mhm.
And that seems to be kind of a fuel for a lot of your mission and a fuel for you writing your book. Am I
Yeah.
right on that?
100%. So, this book had been in the works for a couple of years. That it was not just born out of left field. But when I lost my sister to cancer, I could no longer like keep just delaying it and procrastinating. It was like it had to be completed.
Mm,
And my sister was Superwoman in her world. She was a single mom,
mm,
raised two kids, was a CPA as well. She was 2 years younger than me, and she kind of came through a different path to get there, but she ended up becoming a CPA. She ran her own accounting firm out of the house because her daughter got mono when she was in second grade, and by the time they had to deal with all that, she homeschooled her in second grade, and like she just never got like back on track to get back in regular school.
mm.
So she was dealing with all of that. And then she decided that she had always wanted to be an attorney, and she
Oh,
found a
goodness.
law school, a hybrid law school, and she had gone back to back to school to law school. And one of the last things she finally accomplished before she passed away was graduating from law school.
Oh, good for
And
her.
it's heartbreaking to think that she never got a chance to practice, because it's something that she just always really felt like she would be,
Mm,
and I know she would have been awesome at it. But what I will tell you is that even going through all the cancer treatment, knowing what she needed to do, she still insisted on trying to keep all the balls in the air. And,
mm,
um, like she lowered the stress from a 11 to an 8. And like that was all she kind of could manage
mm.
without getting real and saying like, this has to go, this has to go, this has to go, this has to
Right.
go. You know what I'm saying? To get that stress down, let's just say below a 5 at least, right?
Mhm.
And and so when we are living this super full and fulfilling life like we love, right? Like we
Mhm.
all aspire to, we've got to really have enough self-awareness to recognize when we've taken on too much and be willing to just, as kindly as possible, tell the stakeholders in our world who are depending on us to essentially keep our promises. We said we would do this, and now we're
Mhm.
basically going to have to renege and say, I really thought I could do all this, but I can't like manage all of this simultaneously.
Oh,
And
that's so powerful.
it's a tough, yeah, yeah, it's a really, really tough thing to have to accept and acknowledge, but
Yeah.
it's non-negotiable, honestly. And as you can see in some of these situations, like with my sister. So,
So tell us the name of your book and the subtitle, and then
okay.
give us an overview of the book.
So the book is What's Your Kryptonite? And the subtitle is Manage the Toxic Stressors Threatening Your Superwoman Status.
Love it.
So I wrote the book knowing that women would find it intriguing. At least that's what I wanted. And I
Mhm.
wanted it to be an easy enough read where anybody would pick it up and go, oh yeah, that's really good information. Yeah, but I'm not sure I really need that right now. Like, I'm not sure that really applies to me. But I want women to read it and file it, and when
Mhm.
that time comes, when they start seeing symptoms pop up, they say, oh, she warned me that this was going to happen. She
Oh.
told me that I needed to take this really seriously when these symptoms start accumulating. And so
Mhm.
they'll know what, like, kind of different approach to take rather than just to get sucked in to a system that's just going to essentially do more harm than good. And so kryptonite, if you think about it in the superhuman world,
Mhm.
kryptonite is a substance that Superman, Superwoman, like kryptonite is never sitting out on the dining room table and they walk into the dining room and go, oh, I can't have dinner here because there's kryptonite on the table. They don't see it. They just feel their energy being drained, right? And
Mm.
they're aware enough to say, like, my energy is draining. There's got to be kryptonite here somewhere. I got to distance myself from this. And if I need to be in that environment, then we're going to need to mitigate the kryptonite in that environment, because otherwise I can't be in that environment. And so what tends to happen with these stressors, especially the toxic stressors that are
Mhm.
environmental and um, even even when um, a good stress situation has escalated to essentially toxic stress, like those kinds of things happen in a way that, it's not like you were standing in the middle of um, Wall Street and the plane just hit the Twin Towers. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
obviously that's a stressful situation and you're going to be shocked and traumatized, right? But what ends up happening is all these little stressors are essentially traumatizing us, little mini traumas, and we manage it pretty well. We're like, oh yeah, file it away. Oh yeah, file it away. Oh yeah, file it away. And the way we know it's accumulated to the point where it's no longer manageable is because the symptoms start popping up.
Yes, I love that. And when I was reading it up on, getting ready for our talk today, I'm like chronic stress, the word chronic, it's long term. It's not like you said, it's not like an instant trauma, like I get hit by a car, I
Yeah.
shattered my pelvis, now we have a stress to the body. It's the little tiny micro tears, if you will, that eventually rupture a tendon. Then I
Yeah.
use it metaphorically, right?
Yeah.
It's the saying yes to too many things, denying what you know inside. When your inside is screaming, say no to that. I can't handle one more thing. And then before you know it, you say yes. And now you're committed to the PTA bake sale when you barely can make enough food to feed your own body because you're exhausted. It's those little things that build up and build up and build up like toxins within our body. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And the factor that tends to be missed when you're not in the world that I live in,
Mm-hmm.
or you haven't already been um, indoctrinated, essentially, because you've got some crazy mysterious symptoms or some crazy disease diagnosis. Those people tend to have been forced to educate themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But if you're not already in that world, then you don't understand how toxic things like um, living with EMFs in your environment nonstop,
What's an
being on the
EMF?
blue electromagnetic frequencies. So, the electromagnetic frequencies that are emitted from our phones and our wireless
Oh,
devices. And, people who don't understand this poo-poo it, but like the new iPhone was banned in France because it emits too much radiation. And now you see all these deals on the new iPhone because they didn't sell as many of them as they thought they were going to, because it got banned in Europe. And so,
great.
we take some things for exactly. We take some things for granted. I use um some shields to help like mitigate the radiation from these devices. And our world is a connected world. Like, we're not going to disconnect. I'm not suggesting we disconnect. I'm just suggesting that we understand that toxicity really is hitting us from so many directions, and that when we think like, I could manage this stuff before, why can't I manage it anymore? Well, maybe you're not managing it now, and it's not just because of like the reduced amount of energy you have due to aging. Maybe it's that they installed a new smart meter on your house and now you're not sleeping soundly, and now you're, never being able to do the repair and maintenance work that your body needs to do overnight. Like, there are just so many ways this shows up. It shows up in toxic chemicals. That's another thing that so many people have eliminated gluten. And honestly, other than making bread really yummy, gluten really has no nutritional value, right? But it isn't as much the gluten as it is the chemicals that they spray on the grains to get them through our food chain. And so those are some things that, again, in some countries, a lot of people can go to Europe and they can consume dairy and they can consume, I hiked across Spain last summer and I like lived on croissants, and like I would never eat a croissant here. Like, it just doesn't happen. I don't eat that kind of food, but it didn't bother me because, one, I was moving and I was outside a lot, but they don't use the chemicals in other countries the way we do here. So it's more important to choose organic ingredients if you're cooking at home. Those organic grains are as important as the organic fruits and vegetables. And
Okay,
and
so
so
let me ask you this, just to make sure.
okay.
So when we're talking about toxic stressors, which is the topic of your book, and you talked about toxins in our diet, talked about toxins in our stress, EFTs. Can you give us some more examples of toxic stressors that you address in your book and in your teaching and in your
Yeah.
practice?
Yeah. So 12 categories of toxicity are what I typically evaluate if somebody works with me. And so there is emotional toxicity, and that's what most people think of when they think of stress, right? But there's bacterial overgrowth, there's viral overgrowth, there is mycotoxins, mycoplasma. It's called geopathic stressors, which are these electromagnetic frequencies, the EMFs, fungal toxins. Some people may really be eating a lot of raw foods, and that's thought to be a really good diet, but it tends to cause a buildup of fungal toxins, sometimes mycotoxins, and bacterial toxins potentially, because when the food's not cooked, a lot of that toxicity tends to like remain on the food and be ingested, right? So that's why it's just really important to be mindful. And when you see symptoms popping up, don't just try to whack-a-mole the symptom into submission. Recognize it and say, whoo, I've got a toxic buildup going on somehow, and I've got to figure out how to reverse course. I know you talk about Tony Robbins' work, and Tony talks about how he was eating fish all the time,
You got
and
mercury poisoning.
how he ended up with mercury poisoning, literally mercury poisoning at a level that honestly he shouldn't even have still been able to function,
Yeah,
And
exactly. And
so
he wasn't for a
that's,
while. Yeah.
yeah. So that's heavy metals is another one of the 12 categories that we evaluate. So,
So I'm going to be really upfront with you. It feels a
yeah,
little overwhelming. And
yeah,
I
it
would
is.
imagine I'm probably not the only listener to what you're saying going, Well, holy crap. Like, where do I even start? It feels really heavy. It
Mhm.
feels like there's danger everywhere. And I know that that may not be what you're trying to say, but for somebody like me who's looking to make some changes, but I don't have the time, energy, bandwidth, or maybe even the inclination yet to tackle all those categories, where would you recommend somebody like myself start?
So the first thing I would ask you is how severe are your symptoms?
Okay.
So if you are experiencing symptoms and um, so two things. If you are suppressing symptoms with medication or some other
Mm,
something, then that is already, we know we've got an escalation going on, right?
mhm,
But if you're not really suppressing symptoms and you're not having a lot of like issues, then I would say, you know what? Carry on. Try to eat a little more organic. Try to like do a little better job, like meditate more, do more yoga, like have more fun, get outside and get some sunshine as much as you can. But you're doing okay, right? But if you're one of those people who's already experiencing pretty significant symptoms and maybe even suppressing those symptoms with medication and otherwise, then I hear you that it feels overwhelming. But what I find is that um, there's two schools of thought, and maybe there is a middle road there, but it's either like I'm seemingly suppressing these symptoms successfully right now, and I'm just going
mhm,
to keep kicking this can down the road with this medication until the wheels fall off, or I've been kicking the can down the road with this medication. I'm really concerned about it. And I realize that I have this window of time to
mm,
like pull out of this approach and take a different approach. Right. And so you're going to have to make one of two choices. Essentially, you're going to have to decide to do something that sounds like similar to what you said you did, where you really made a lot of changes that allowed you
mm,
to have a different experience, the um but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you're
mhm,
already having significant symptoms, you can keep kicking the can down the road. And at some point, as I talk about in my book, at some point you're going to be sitting in the chair across from the doctor, the medical doctor, getting some crazy disease diagnosis that
mhm.
then you're like, at that point you're going to have no option but to like pause everything and deal with it,
Right.
right?
Right.
All I'm
So,
saying right now is to just pause a little bit and
mhm.
provide a little relief.
So when you say experiencing significant symptoms, can we get specific here? Like when because
Okay.
let me give you a little background of why I'm asking it this way. So for me right now, I was having or am having some significant tightness and hardness in my uterine area. And so I went to see my OB and I have two 10-centimeter grapefruit sized fibroids growing
Mm.
on my uterus. And my doctor's like, well, we need to do a hysterectomy and I'm sending you to a gynecological oncologist. Nobody wants to hear the word oncologist.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here like completely stunned. I knew I had some fibroids. They're growing really fast. Now she's sending me to a cancer doctor. And now I'm just like, I'm trying to figure out like, wait, what's happening? So my symptoms are very clear, but is that the kind of symptoms you're talking about? Like my symptoms are I have a rock hard uterus that shouldn't be rock hard because I have two grapefruits essentially in my abdomen that shouldn't be there. And it's crowding out other things. Now that's a
Yeah.
very personal example, but when
Yeah.
you use the word symptoms, if I'm a listener, and I am because I'm listening to everything you're saying,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, okay, girl, just give it to me straight. Give me the list. What do you mean? What do you mean by
Yeah.
symptoms? Like I don't make me figure this
So,
out.
so you had from what you're experiencing right now is beyond the symptom stage. What you're experiencing right now is the crazy disease diagnosis stage.
Got
You
it.
know, it's
Yeah.
like, it's like I kind of knew something was going on. Something didn't feel right. Like I
Mm-hmm.
kept just powering through, pushing through it. And now you're at the crazy disease diagnosis stage. And that crazy disease diagnosis stage could be literally anything. Cancer, obviously, anytime they even like drop the word oncologist or
Mm-hmm.
cancer into it, scares the living bejesus out of us, right? And for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, what I'm talking about, by the time you get to that point, and that's what I also talk about in the book, by the time you get to that point, you don't have a lot of time to make decisions and rethink it. And
Mm.
you know what I'm saying? Like at
Yeah.
that point, they're rushing you to make a decision. They're telling you that if you don't have the operation in the next 2 weeks, you could die, you know, like
Oh, let
all
me
of
make it
those
very
sort.
clear though. They're not saying that. I just don't want to freak anybody out.
Okay.
They're not
Okay.
saying that. It's not that
Okay.
dire, but I understand what you're saying. The point is,
But
at this
that's
point, I have a
they,
diagnosis. Yeah.
yeah. Just to let you know, my husband had woke up a couple of weeks ago with a black spot in one of his eyes, and that's his like weak spot in his body, has eye issues. And so he turned to Dr. Google, and it said he had macular degeneration. And
Darn Dr.
so
Google.
yeah, so he called the eye doctor, and they were like, you've got to come in. It's an emergency. Your retina's going to detach. And he's like, honestly, it would happened almost a week ago. And if it hasn't detached already, a couple more days isn't going to hurt. I've got 2 days packed with patients, and he's a psychotherapist. And and so he finally went in to see the doctor, and the doctor did all the tests and everything and said, oh, it's not macular degeneration at all. It's essentially the equivalent of a massive floater in his eye. And
Oh.
so I was ecstatic because I was like, a floater, we could totally deal with the floater. Like I can deal with the floater all day long. A
Mm-hmm.
detached retina,
No.
that's like
Yeah.
outside of my scope, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, so once you get to the point where you have to get a diagnosis, and then if they would have found his retina threatening to detach,
Mm-hmm.
then he's going to have to make some emergency decision that is reflective of getting to that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm wanting to get women to realize is that you had a zillion signs before you got to that point that
Mm-hmm.
you kind of like didn't take seriously, you
So give me
know?
some examples. Give our listeners some examples, like signs, symptoms, because I can imagine women are like, "Wait, is that a sign? Is that a
Yeah.
symptom?" Like,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to
Good,
freak
good point,
anybody out.
right?
We don't want to freak
Yeah.
anybody out,
So,
but we do want to equip
so
women.
yeah. So, pain relievers of any sort, if you are taking a pain reliever of any sort more than, honestly, I would say once a month, but let's just say once a week. Because when I tell women that they shouldn't be taking a pain reliever more than once a month, they look at me like I'm an alien, you know, because
Mm,
most people are taking some sort of pain reliever, oftentimes daily, right? And so if you're taking acid reflux medication,
mm-hmm,
ibuprofen, Aleve, Tylenol, any sort of medication for sleep to promote sleep, like any of those medications are all they're doing is driving the toxicity and driving the problem further into the body, right?
mm,
And so I don't know your situation. I don't know if
mm-hmm,
that was what was going on with you. There would be a lot of like unraveling that would have to happen.
mm-hmm,
But for women who are um, um, listening to this and are totally understandable what you're saying, like she gave me nothing to work with. All she told me was like, toxins are everywhere. Gotten to a level where you can't manage it, then you're gonna have to reduce the and creating a healthy sleep environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that. It's interesting because I know as we get older as women and we go through perimenopause in particular, and I'm speaking to all my sisters out there going through perimenopause, like, your body, I'm not gonna say your body betrays us, but our body does a number on us when we have kids, right? We're like, wait, no, what is going on here? Like none of this ever happened before. And then we come out of that, we have this time in life. We're like, we're going through life, we're managing. Then all of a sudden we get to perimenopause. Well, it's doing it again. Hold on one sec. Hold on one sec. Record. So as somebody who's going through perimenopause, are there symptoms in perimenopause women or menopausal women that we should pay particular attention? And maybe this is outside your scope. I don't know, but you can tell I'm asking questions. I really want to know the answers too, because if there's because when our
You know
body's
what? You're
freaking
not
out.
alone. Yeah, you're not
What's
alone.
going on? So give me some of those symptoms that you would see in a woman who's perimenopausal that you'd be like, okay, honey, I hate to break it to you. Tough talk. This is the change. You got to ride the wave. And then there's other symptoms where you're like, all right, sister, we got to have a different conversation. Can you give me some of the differences there?
So let me just start by helping you understand why some women kind of cruise through menopause and have a fairly easy ride, and other women have a really bumpy ride. And the
Mm,
difference is what our level of energy reserve is as we go into that period. So if we're already dealing with adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue of some sort, if we're living like a pretty high stress, burning the candle at both ends, life and lifestyle,
mm-hmm,
um, our adrenals take over from our female reproductive system to keep everything in balance. The human body, the female body, was designed to go through this. It isn't like it's something out of left field, right?
right.
And so if you're having a rough ride, again, that's another sign that you've got too much stress, and you've got to free up some resources in order for your
Mm,
body to be able to deal with it. And then, I don't know, did you ever have a C-section with any of you? Have four girls, like you had to be a
sure do.
baby factory for that decade.
It felt
You
that
had
way.
two?
I had two C-sections, first and last.
Okay. So what I will say is that, and it just happens, my husband had his appendix taken out when he was a kid, like we just, anytime they cut into the body and they disrupt all those energy channels and all of that, fascia. The fascia is how our energy sort of roams around the body. So if you had a disruption in that energy system, and maybe over the years, the scar tissue has become more and more kind of um, hard, if you
Mm-hmm,
will, that could have contributed to it. And then you add in the changes to the hormones in the mix, and
mm-hmm,
now the fibroids kind of get out of control, right? So
mm-hmm,
so there's always sort of an explanation for it. And then there's so there's the explanation for it. And then how much, like, we're never going to go back and completely reverse the effects of you having 2 C-sections, right? So that's like not realistic, although we can do a lot to break up the scar, internal scarring that is impeding your internal energy flow. And we can also free up some energy resources by just making sure that you're dialing back your stress and that you're, spending plenty of time outside in the sunshine. That's, literally the sun is how our body naturally recharges its battery. And so many of us spend virtually no time in the sun. And if we are in the sun, we've got like, a 1/4 inch thick SPF on. So if you're not able to spend time in the sun, then you've got to have other ways to ground and to recharge your battery. And there are ways to do that, probably more than we can get into in an hour on this show. But I will just say that some of the main ways that you reduce your toxic load are by cleaning up your diet. Diet is the main source of toxicity, I would say. And so, there are things we do that are optional. The one thing about our diet is it's optional.
Oh, I love
Right?
that. Okay, you just dropped a bomb there. We have to highlight that.
Okay.
Sisters, listen up. Dr. Gorman just said, and it's true, the beautiful thing about our diet is it's optional. This is amazing. And unless you're food insecure, and I don't pretend to know what that's like, but I can imagine that your options might be more limited in that. But for the vast, vast majority of the people listening to this podcast, our diet is optional. I mean, I'm going to be frank. Right before this, I ate like 5 Starbursts. I'm just being real with you. I was preparing and they looked good to me and I ingested those toxins. I can see the wrappers. They're taunting me from especially talking to you. I'm like, cover up. I want to like cover up those wrappers. So we are human. Sometimes we got to eat the Starbursts, but let's be honest though. We have to be honest. And this is what I love about what you're saying is like, you are giving us a menu. I'm going to keep playing on the word things because it's what I do. You are giving us a menu of options. And I have always raised my daughters to tell them, I want to be a mom that shows you that as a woman, you always have options. I tell my legal clients that. I tell my podcasting community that you have options. Sisters, when it comes to our diet, when it comes to our health, we have options and we need to exercise those options in a way that is congruent with our values. So, Dr. Gorman, tell our listeners, like if you could, I'm a big proponent of lists of 5. I love the number 5. The number 5 feels powerful to me. It feels doable, but it doesn't feel super restrictive. So if you could give me, and I know I didn't prepare you for this question, so just go with whatever your spirit leads you. Give us the 5 best tips you can give us for managing our diet, for managing the option that we have to have to have a less toxic diet. That's the better question.
So, no surprise, I have what I refer to as the Fierce 5.
Hey, I didn't even know that.
If you will eliminate the Fierce 5 for at least a month, 4 to 6 weeks, just if you can't even imagine that, then do it for a week and see how it goes.
It doesn't include Starbucks, does it? Starbucks and Starbursts? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
As long as you are careful about what you're putting in there. I drink Starbucks green iced tea, but I don't put any sugar in it. So it's not a problem.
All right, go ahead. Start over.
Dairy, gluten, yeast, sugar, and alcohol. And
you're killing me, you know that, right? You're killing me.
I know,
but it's good.
And I'm telling you that if you want the fastest and easiest way to reduce toxicity, those 5 things are what I find are the most common and relatively speaking, not that hard. The reason why I include yeast is because many women have a problem with candida, a yeast overgrowth. And a lot of women have gone to alternative grains from stopping gluten, and they put 2 to 3 times the yeast in the gluten-free baked goods. So
So it's
now
like
all
you're
of a
jumping out
sudden,
of the frying pan into the fire is what
yeah,
you're doing.
yeah, exactly. And so that's why I say you have to be a little careful. I don't really recommend these alternative foods that are just sort of a replacement food, a hack, if you will. You
Mm-hmm.
know, what I'm asking you to do is go back to eating like real food, like
Mm-hmm.
some form of healthy, clean protein and a salad. With some
Yeah.
nice, vinaigrette dressing. And that may sound boring, but you can have rice and potatoes. I'm not a like low carb, keto crazy person. Um, you know, I I don't think that's sustainable, and I don't think that's even really healthy long term. But some of these other things I've just found, you may be one of the odd people that cow's milk dairy really doesn't cause a problem for you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a very rare person that that's the case. And
So
almost
can we ask, I
every,
have a question about
yeah,
dairy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, doctor,
that's right.
but dairy, I grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
So I'm always very interested in my background. We didn't have cows, but a lot of people around us had cows and pigs, and we had chickens. So when I think about dairy and I think about cow's milk, okay, I've studied enough of this. I've been in Tony Robbins' world for enough. Like, okay, I can probably move away from some dairy. I just want to make sure I understand. Oat milk is non-dairy. Is that correct?
Oat milk is non-dairy. You do want to make sure, though, that it's organic, because if they've used oats that have been sprayed with glyphosate as a preservative, then you've again gone out of the frying pan into the fire, right? You want to try to
Mm.
do like high quality ingredients. But you are correct. Oat milk, honestly, is kind of my go-to if I need a milk substitute. But where dairy is concerned, I feel your pain about loving the cows,
I love
um,
cheese. It's
but
cheese.
yeah, I totally hear you with the cheese as well. I love my ranch dressing, but the interesting thing is that most people, when they go from the cow's milk dairy, they move to goat's milk dairy.
Hmm.
And I had already noticed that I was having an issue with the goat's milk dairy as well. It was not agreeing with me. And I was at a farmer's market in Greenville, South Carolina, about a year ago. And I was talking to the farmer that was at the stand and telling her that I had found that I couldn't tolerate goat's milk dairy either. And what she said was that goats are interesting. She said some of the goats have the same enzymatic structure in their dairy that cows do. So if
Mm-hmm.
that's the case, then if you've got an issue digesting cow's milk dairy, you'll also have an issue digesting the goat milk dairy.
Hmm.
The problem is you can't look at the goat and know what their dairy is going to come out like, right?
Right.
But the good news is no sheep have that same enzymatic structure. So if you just love your dairy, you just need a little cheese, you need to find the good high quality sheep's milk feta, sheep's milk manchego. You can use
Hmm.
manchego cheese, grate it in replacement of the like Parmesan cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And the feta, the sheep's milk feta, honestly, if you went to Greece, that's what they use is sheep's milk feta.
Okay, so I
Normally,
love
if you go
that.
to a, yeah,
I was just
if you
gonna,
normally if you go to a Greek restaurant here in the US, they've all converted to cow's milk because it's cheaper. But
right. So in your book, do you provide alternatives when you go through your toxins? Do you provide alternatives and give the readers guidance on how they can fight the toxins and replace them? with different
There's
practices?
there's not, the book would essentially then become a Bible like huge thing. And
Huge.
I wrote the book to be more of a introduction to what's
Got it.
really causing the stress and what you need to be watching for and that sort of thing. So if you're looking for more details,
Mm-hmm.
you can follow me on my social channels. You can go to my website and plug in, get on my mailing list. And that I think
Perfect.
would be a better place to get a little more ongoing, deeper information.
Okay, I love that because you just took one of my last two questions, which is where people can find you. I'm gonna just let our listeners know. I mean, we can't handle it all in a podcast, but I want you to know that this woman is so fascinating. She is a fount of wisdom, and I know our conversation went lots of different directions. It's because there is a lot here, and so I would encourage everybody listening to follow her on Instagram, to go to her website. Get plugged into this woman because she is passionate about helping women handle chronic stress. And if there's one thing, I mean, we're recording this right before Mother's Day. It's not going to come out for a few weeks, but I'm in that mindset where I'm just thinking about, and I think I said that to her before we started recording. How unfair is it that Mother's Day is in the middle of May? May is crazy pants for women. And it's like you take the toxic levels of stress we have in our lives and like let's 10x it. And then, you know what, we're just going to carve out a day in the middle of it for Mother's Day. But I want you to follow this woman. I want you to listen to her. I want you to educate yourself. I believe in bringing in a number of different perspectives. There's no one perspective, there's no one size fits all, but we need to take care of this vessel. We need to listen to her signals. And if she's giving you signals that something is wrong, listen to her because our bodies are designed, like Dr. Gorman said, to heal. Our bodies are designed to go gracefully through the aging process. So if something is telling you something's wrong, listen up. And I have one final question I'd like to wrap up our time together with, and it's a little off the beaten path, but I use it with every guest I have. Shamelessly rip this off from Jen Hatmaker. She's an incredible podcaster, but whenever she asks this question of her guests, the answers are so fascinating. You can answer this question however you want. You can answer it scientifically, you can answer it funny, doesn't matter. But I just want you to tell our listeners, if you could say one thing, what is saving your life right now?
Homeopathy.
Okay, you got to define that for me.
So homeopathy is essentially a water that has been energized with frequency and reboots the energetic frequency so that your body knows what to do. It's not that different from rebooting your computer when all the, you get too many tabs open, right? You got too many
Don't look at my
confusing
computer
messages
right now.
going.
Don't do that, doctor. You can't.
I'm 100% with you on there, but yeah, actually, I just put myself on a new protocol yesterday, and I do the same thing that I recommend to my patients, and I struggle with the same things you guys all struggle with. I love my ranch dressing and my cheese, and I love a glass of red wine here and there, and I love that crusty, Italian bread at the restaurant. And, I'm never met a cupcake I don't love, so I'm 100% there with you, but we just need to learn to do it in moderation. And when we see the signs that something has accumulated to the point where our body's no longer managing it easily, then we need to take it as a wake-up call and say, whoa, 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 gotta like dial it back until I get this under control. And then I can cheat a little. I can
I love it.
moderate, you know?
Moderation, sisters. Did you hear that? Moderation. Don't get overwhelmed. Make sure you moderate, but make sure you educate yourself. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your message.
Thanks for having me, Christine.
Of course. Okay, that conversation was so much fire. I mean, I literally, if you're looking at me on YouTube, you would notice I'm just like, okay, tell me more. And then I have this question and that question, and there's so much more I wanted to ask Dr. Gorman. So I hope that you will follow her. Take care of your bodies, sisters, because if we don't have our health, we don't have our wealth. And if we don't have our health, we can't get out there and serve and love and grow and live the beautiful, compelling lives that we deserve. So take care of yourselves, get educated, and listen to your body's beautiful signals, because we are made to have compelling lives. We're in this together forever and ever and ever. And I love you, girl. So I want you to be healthy. We'll see you next time.